I never thought I'd be in this position, questioning everything about my marriage and my life. Jenna and I had been together for 12 years, and for most of that time I thought we had a rock-solid partnership. I'm a businessman, I work long hours, travel frequently, and deal with the kind of stress that can eat a person alive. Jenna, on the other hand, was the foundation of our family. She stayed home to raise our 2 kids, kept the house running like clockwork, and made sure we always had something to come home to. At least, that's how it used to be. Over the last year or so, something shifted in Jenna. It wasn't dramatic, no slamming doors or screaming fights, but it was there. Subtle things. She'd sigh more often, stare out the window while folding laundry, or get lost in her phone for hours. When I asked her if something was wrong, she'd brush me off with a quick, "I'm fine, Mark, just tired." But she wasn't fine. I could feel the distance growing between us, even if I couldn't put my finger on why. At first, I thought it was just a phase. Our kids were getting older and more independent, and Jenna suddenly had a lot more free time on her hands. I figured she was just adjusting to the change. One night, she said something that stuck with me. We were sitting on the couch after dinner, the kids already in bed, and she looked at me and said, "Do you ever feel like you're just existing? Like you're not really living, just going through the motions?" I didn't know how to respond. Sure, my days were busy and stressful, but I liked my life. I thought Jenna did too. "I don't know," I said. "I guess I'm just focused on keeping everything running smoothly." "Why? Do you feel that way?" She hesitated before shrugging. "Sometimes. I don't know. It's nothing." But it wasn't nothing. It was the beginning of something I didn't understand yet. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. Jenna started spending more time away from home, saying she needed to clear her head or get out of the house. At first, I encouraged it. I thought maybe she needed a change of scenery or some time to herself. "Go meet up with friends," I told her. "Take a class, do something for you." She nodded but didn't commit to anything. Instead, she started taking long drives, going to parks, or wandering around the city on her own. She'd come back home looking different, not necessarily happy, but lighter somehow. When I asked her where she'd been, she'd give vague answers. Just around, or nowhere important. She also started dressing differently. Jenna had always been stylish, but now she was putting more effort into her appearance, curling her hair, wearing makeup more often, buying clothes that didn't exactly scream suburban mom. I told myself it was a good thing. Maybe she was trying to pull herself out of whatever funk she was in, but deep down it felt off. Then there were the conversations, or rather, the lack of them. Jenna used to tell me everything, little stories about her day, funny things the kids said, even random thoughts that popped into her head. But now, our talks were short and surface level. She'd ask me how work was, I'd ask her how the kids were, and that was it. No deeper connection, no warmth. I tried to fix it. I really did. I started coming home earlier when I could, planning date nights and doing little things to show her I cared. I'd bring home flowers or surprise her with her favorite takeout. For a while, it seemed to help. She'd smile and thank me, and I'd think, maybe this is what she needed. But it didn't last. It was a Friday, and I had just come back from a 3-day business trip. I'd been working late nights, trying to close a deal that had been dragging on for weeks. I was exhausted, but I was also looking forward to seeing Jenna. I thought maybe we could spend the evening together, just the 2 of us, and reconnect. When I walked into the house, it was quiet. Too quiet. Normally, Jenna would have music playing in the kitchen or a TV show on in the living room, but this time, there was nothing. Just silence. "Jenna," I called out, setting my bag down by the door. No response. I checked the kitchen. Empty. The living room, the backyard. Nothing. Her car wasn't in the driveway, so I figured she was out running errands or meeting up with a friend. I didn't think much of it until I noticed her phone sitting on the counter. I'm not the kind of guy who snoops through my wife's things. I've always trusted Jenna, even when things between us felt off. But something about seeing her phone there, unlocked, made me pause. It was almost like a warning sign flashing in my gut, telling me something wasn't right. Before I could pick it up, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Jenna. "I'm not coming home tonight." I stared at the screen, rereading the message like it was written in another language. What did she mean she wasn't coming home? Was there an emergency? Did something happen? I immediately called her, but it went straight to voicemail. I texted back, "Jenna, what's going on? Are you okay?" No response. I paced the house, checking my phone every few minutes, hoping for some kind of follow-up. But there was nothing. Just that one cryptic message. My mind raced with possibilities. Was she with a friend? Was she upset about something I'd said or done? Was this her way of trying to get my attention? The hours dragged on, and my worry turned into something darker. I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever was happening, it wasn't good. That night felt like the longest night of my life. I sat in the living room, my phone clutched in my hand, waiting for Jenna to respond. But the hours passed in silence. Midnight came and went, and still nothing. My worry turned into frustration, then anger. How could she just disappear like this? How could she send a vague text like, "I'm not coming home tonight," and then vanish without a word? I barely slept. Every sound outside, cars passing, leaves rustling, made me jump. I thought about calling friends or family to see if they'd heard from her, but something stopped me. Maybe it was pride, or maybe I didn't want to admit that something was seriously wrong. Instead, I sat in that quiet house, replaying the last few months in my head, trying to figure out how we'd gotten here. The next morning, my phone buzzed. It was another text from Jenna. "Mark, I need space. I've felt trapped for so long, and I can't do this anymore. I'm staying with someone who understands me. Please don't try to find me." I stared at the message, my hands shaking. Someone who understands her? Who the hell was she talking about? My heart pounded as a million scenarios flashed through my mind. Was she with another man? Was this some kind of midlife crisis? Or had I really been so blind that I didn't see this coming? I tried calling her again, but it went straight to voicemail. I sent her a text. "Jenna, what are you talking about? Where are you? We need to talk." No reply. By late afternoon, my frustration boiled over. I started digging. If Jenna wasn't going to tell me the truth, I'd find it myself. I went through the house, looking for any clues about where she might be. Her suitcase was gone, along with a few changes of clothes. But other than that, everything looked normal. Too normal. Then I checked her computer. Jenna wasn't the most tech-savvy person, and she'd never bothered to log out of anything. I opened her email and scanned through her recent messages. Most of it was junk, promotions, newsletters, reminders for yoga classes she'd stopped attending months ago. But one thread caught my eye. It was from a name I didn't recognize. Eli M. The subject line read, "Last night's set list. What a night." I clicked on it. The email wasn't long, but it was enough to make my stomach turn. "Jenna, last night was incredible. Seeing you out there dancing and smiling made my night. I've got another gig tomorrow if you're free. Hope to see you there. Your energy lights up the room." Eli had also attached a photo. It was a blurry shot of a small crowd gathered around a man playing guitar on a street corner. My heart sank when I spotted Jenna in the photo, standing front and center, her hands raised in the air like she didn't have a care in the world. I didn't know who Eli was, but I had a hunch. Jenna had mentioned in passing a few weeks ago that she'd been exploring new parts of the city, checking out markets and parks. She'd come home one night raving about a musician she'd seen playing rock and roll on the street. "He's so talented, Mark," she'd said, her eyes lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in months. "It's like he plays with his soul." At the time, I hadn't thought much of it. Jenna's always been drawn to creative types, and I figured she'd just had a nice moment of escape. But now, with the emails and the photo, it was clear this wasn't just a passing admiration. She'd found something, or someone, that made her feel alive again. And it wasn't me. Fueled by equal parts anger and desperation, I decided to find this Eli. I Googled his name, combined with the words street musician in the area Jenna had been frequenting. It didn't take long to find him. His Instagram page was full of photos from his performances, street corners, small bars, outdoor markets. And there, in one of the photos, was Jenna again. She wasn't just watching this time, she was sitting next to him, laughing as he played his guitar. The caption read, "Late night jams with a beautiful soul." I slammed my laptop shut, my chest tightening. This was real. Jenna wasn't just finding herself or exploring new hobbies. She had walked away from our life, our marriage, to follow some guy who played rock and roll on the street. Just as I was trying to process everything, my phone buzzed again. Another text from Jenna. "Mark, I've always admired how stable and responsible you are, but I need more than stability. I need passion, excitement, freedom. Eli gives me that. He plays his music and I feel alive. I've started riding bikes with him at night, dancing under the stars, doing all the things I've only dreamed of. Please don't hate me for this." I couldn't believe what I was reading. She wasn't just leaving me. She was leaving her entire life behind for some guy she barely knew. A street musician, for God's sake. My hands were shaking as I tried to type a response. But what could I even say? How do you respond to something like that? After reading Jenna's text, I was flooded with a mix of anger, confusion, and heartbreak. Part of me wanted to let her go, to just walk away and leave her to her so-called passion. But another part of me, the part that had loved her for over a decade, couldn't let go without a fight. I sent her a message. "Jenna, I don't understand. You can't just walk out on everything we've built. Please, let's talk." Hours passed without a reply. I tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. By the next morning, I couldn't take the silence anymore. I remembered one of the locations from Eli's Instagram posts, an outdoor market downtown where he often performed. I decided to go there, hoping I might find them. It didn't take long to spot them. Eli was set up on the edge of the market, strumming his guitar and singing an old rock and roll tune. A small crowd had gathered, clapping along, but my eyes were glued to Jenna. She was standing right next to him, swaying to the music, her face glowing with an energy I hadn't seen in years. When the song ended, I stepped forward. "Jenna," I said, my voice louder than I intended. She froze, her smile vanishing as she turned to face me. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then she stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Mark, what are you doing here?" "I should be asking you that," I said. "What the hell is going on, Jenna? You send me a text saying you're not coming home, and now you're here, doing this." Eli, clearly sensing the tension, put his guitar down and walked away, giving us space. Jenna crossed her arms, looking more annoyed than apologetic. "I told you, Mark, I need space. I need to feel alive." "Alive," I repeated, my voice rising. "You think leaving your family to run around with some street musician is the answer? Jenna, this isn't you." Her jaw tightened. "How would you know who I am anymore? You're always working, always stressed. You don't see me, Mark. You haven't in years." "That's not fair," I said, my frustration boiling over. "I've been working my ass off to give us a good life. Everything I've done has been for you and the kids. And this is how you repay me?" Jenna's face softened, but only slightly. "I'm not saying you're a bad husband, Mark. You've always been stable, dependable, but I can't live my life just being someone's wife or someone's mom. I need more." I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "Jenna, we can work through this. If you're unhappy, we'll figure it out together. But this? Running off like this? It's not the answer." She shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "I've been trying to tell you for months, Mark. I've been screaming inside, and you haven't heard me." "Because you never said anything," I snapped. "You bottled it all up and then decided to blow up our lives instead of talking to me. Do you have any idea what this is doing to me? To the kids?" That seemed to hit a nerve. She looked away, wiping her eyes. "I didn't mean to hurt you, but I can't go back to that life, Mark. I won't." At that moment, Eli returned, clearly uncomfortable but determined to insert himself. "Hey, man," he said, his tone cautious. "I think you should leave. Jenna doesn't need this right now." I turned to him, my fist clenched. "You don't get to tell me what my wife needs." "She's not your wife anymore," Eli shot back, his confidence growing. "She's her own person. Maybe you should start respecting that." Jenna stepped between us before things could escalate. "Stop," she said firmly, looking at me. "This isn't about him. This is about me." I stared at her, my heart breaking all over again. "Jenna," I said softly, "come home. Please. We can fix this." She hesitated, but then she shook her head. "I'm sorry, Mark. I can't." There was nothing more to say. I looked at Jenna one last time, hoping she'd change her mind, but her expression was resolute. She had made her choice, and it wasn't me. I turned and walked away, feeling like the ground had been ripped out from under me. I didn't know what I was going to do, but one thing was clear. The life I thought I had was gone. Walking away from Jenna that day was one of the hardest things I've ever done. My chest felt hollow, like someone had scooped out my insides and left me standing there, empty. I didn't go straight home. I couldn't. Instead, I drove aimlessly, replaying the confrontation in my head, trying to make sense of it all. How had we gotten here? How had the woman I'd built my life with, the mother of my kids, become a stranger? I kept thinking about the way she looked at Eli, the way her face lit up when she talked about feeling alive. I couldn't remember the last time she'd looked at me like that. By the time I pulled into our driveway, it was dark. The house felt like a tomb, silent and heavy with the absence of her presence. I sat in the car for what felt like hours, unable to go inside. I didn't want to face the emptiness. I didn't want to face the kids. The next morning, I sat the kids down at the kitchen table. I didn't have a plan for what I was going to say. I just knew I had to tell them something. "Mom's going through some things right now," I said, my voice shaking. "She's taking some time to figure things out." My daughter Emily frowned. "What do you mean? Where is she?" "She's staying with a friend," I lied, "but she loves you both very much." My son Jake looked down at his cereal, his face unreadable. He's always been quiet like me, but I could tell he was upset. "Is she coming back?" he asked. "I don't know," I admitted, and it broke me to say it. "I hope so." The truth was, I didn't know anything anymore. All I could do was hold it together for their sake, even as everything inside me was falling apart. The next few weeks were a blur. I threw myself into work, partly to distract myself and partly to avoid being in the house without Jenna. Every time I walked into the bedroom and saw her side of the bed empty, it felt like a punch to the gut. Her closet was half empty, her favorite mug still sat in the kitchen cabinet, and her scent lingered on the pillows. It was like she was both gone and not gone at the same time. Friends started to notice something was wrong. At first I tried to brush it off, but eventually I opened up to a couple of close friends. Their reactions were a mix of shock and sympathy. "I never thought Jenna would do something like this," one of them said. "She always seemed so grounded." "Yeah, well, I guess none of us really knew her," I replied, bitterness creeping into my voice. One night, after putting the kids to bed, I sat on the couch with a glass of whiskey, staring at the wall. I realized that I couldn't keep living like this, waiting for Jenna to come back, hoping she'd change her mind. I had to accept that the woman I married, the woman I thought I knew, was gone. I started focusing on myself. I joined a gym, something I hadn't done in years. I reconnected with old friends, people I'd drifted away from because I'd been so consumed by work and family. I even started seeing a therapist, which wasn't easy for someone like me who's used to handling everything on his own. But it helped. Slowly, I began to piece myself back together. The hardest part was letting go of the idea that I could fix this. I'd always been a fixer, a problem solver. But this wasn't something I could solve. Jenna had made her choice, and I had to make mine. Just when I thought I was starting to move on, Jenna came back. It was late on a Friday night, about 3 months after she'd left. I was sitting on the couch, watching a game, when I heard a knock at the door. I opened it, and there she was, standing on the porch with a small suitcase in hand. "Mark," she said, her voice soft. "Can we talk?" I stared at her, too stunned to speak. She looked different, tired, worn down, like the weight of whatever she'd been chasing had finally caught up with her. "Why are you here?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. She hesitated, looking down at her feet. "I made a mistake," she said finally. "I thought I wanted something different, something exciting. But I was wrong. I miss you. I miss us." Her words hit me like a freight train. Part of me wanted to pull her inside, hold her, and pretend none of this had happened. But another part of me, the part that had spent the last 3 months rebuilding myself, didn't know if I could ever trust her again. "I don't know, Jenna," I said after a long silence. "I don't know if I can do this." Jenna's return threw my world into chaos. For months, I'd been forcing myself to move forward, to accept that she was gone. I had started rebuilding my life brick by brick, trying to create something stable for the kids and myself. And now, here she was, standing on my porch, asking to come back into a life she'd walked away from. I didn't invite her inside right away. Instead, we sat on the porch steps, the cool night air heavy with unspoken words. "I thought I could find happiness out there," she said, her voice trembling. "I thought running away would fix what was wrong inside me. But it didn't. All I found was regret." Her words were raw, almost desperate, and I could tell she believed them. But the part of me that had been shattered by her betrayal wasn't ready to forgive so easily. "Why now?" I asked. "What changed?" She looked down at her hands, fidgeting with the hem of her jacket. "Eli, it wasn't what I thought it was. It was exciting at first. He made me feel alive, like I was someone new. But it didn't take long for the cracks to show. He doesn't want stability, Mark. He doesn't want responsibility. He wants a fantasy, and I can't be that for him." I nodded slowly, processing her words. "So when the fantasy fell apart, you came back to reality." She flinched, but she didn't argue. "I know I hurt you. I know I hurt the kids, and I don't expect you to forgive me overnight, but I want to try. I want to fix this, if you'll let me." After she left that night, I sat alone in the living room, my mind racing. Could I take her back? Should I? A part of me still loved her, the woman I married, the mother of my children. But another part of me couldn't forget the pain she'd caused, the way she'd walked out without a second thought. Over the next few days, I talked to friends, my therapist, and even my kids. Emily was cautiously optimistic. "If she really wants to come back, maybe we should give her a chance," she said. Jake, on the other hand, was more skeptical. "How do you know she won't just leave again?" he asked. It was a question I couldn't answer. My therapist helped me see that forgiveness wasn't about pretending the betrayal hadn't happened. "Forgiveness is a choice," she said. "It's about deciding whether the person who hurt you is worth rebuilding with. But only you can decide that." Jenna and I met a week later at a park near our house. It was a neutral place, somewhere that didn't hold memories of our life together. She looked nervous, clutching her coffee cup like it was a lifeline. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," I began. "And I need to know one thing. Why didn't you talk to me before it got to this point? Why didn't you tell me how unhappy you were?" She sighed, tears pooling in her eyes. "I didn't know how. You were always so busy, so focused on work and the kids. I thought if I told you, you'd brush it off or tell me to hang in there. I felt invisible, Mark. And Eli, he made me feel seen." Her words stung, but they also revealed something I hadn't wanted to admit to myself. I had been distant too. I had poured so much of myself into providing for our family that I hadn't noticed the cracks forming in our marriage. "That doesn't excuse what you did," I said firmly. "You had a choice, Jenna, and instead of working through it with me, you ran." She nodded, wiping her tears. "I know, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life. But I want to make things right, if you'll let me." In the end, I realized that the decision wasn't just about Jenna. It was about me. Could I let go of the anger and betrayal? Could I trust her again, knowing how easily she'd left? And most importantly, could I see a future where we were happy together? It wasn't an easy choice, but I decided to give her a chance, not for her, but for us. For the life we'd built and the love we'd shared. But I made it clear that this wasn't a reset. "If we do this," I told her, "it's going to take time, effort, and honesty. From both of us." She nodded, her face filled with a mix of relief and determination. "I'll do whatever it takes, Mark." Rebuilding wasn't easy. Trust doesn't come back overnight, and there were days when I wondered if I'd made the right choice. We went to couples therapy, something we should have done years ago. We started communicating in ways we never had before, laying everything out on the table, our fears, our frustrations, our hopes. There were setbacks, of course, moments when the pain bubbled back to the surface, when the memories of what she'd done threatened to undo everything we were working toward. But slowly, we began to heal. For the first time in years, we weren't just going through the motions. We were building something real. Looking back, I've realized that no marriage is perfect. It's easy to get caught up in routines, to assume that everything is fine because no one's complaining. But love requires attention, effort, and honesty. If one person feels invisible, the cracks will start to form, whether you see them or not. If I could give advice to anyone in a similar situation, it would be this. Don't wait until it's too late to address the problems in your relationship. Talk to your partner. Really talk. And if the trust is broken, take the time to decide if it's something you can rebuild, or if it's time to walk away. As for Jenna and me, we're still a work in progress, but for the first time in a long time, I feel hopeful. And maybe that's enough. Do you agree?